Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I'm joined for the first time in a hot minute, dude. Welcome in, Greg Zumach. How's it going, man?
It has been a while, actually. I was as we were prepping for this, I even had the thought in my mind of like, actually, this has been quite a while since we've been on and talked, but been good. This is the biggest week of the year for me, and we are officially into MLB Draft week. The first 3 rounds will be this upcoming Sunday, followed by rounds 4 through 20, which is going to be a gauntlet the following day. And so we are T minus, I don't know, 6 days or so until, and probably 5 days by the time you're listening to this, to the MLB draft. So I've been good. I've actually just got back from a showcase here in Omaha of 2026s and 2027 high school guys that I'm going to put some stuff out, when the dust settles on 2025, so we don't kind of confuse too much. But I've been good. It's a good time of the year.
Yeah, so I kind of detailed on last week's show with Brian that coming up we'd have kind of some jam-packed, like very specific and really the same type of episodes that we do every year around this time of year, right? Where we have this episode, which is a kind of serves as an MLB draft preview show, and then next week the goal is we're gonna put out a MLB draft recap show, and then I believe the week after that, I'll have to check my schedule. Either the week after that or the week after that, I'll be doing a episode about my new top prospect list, which I'll release probably soon after the draft. And then we're going to have an episode dedicated to some trade deadline stuff that's going on. Obviously, in years past, unfortunately, we've done a lot of, hey, look at the prospects that the Cubs acquired. Last year was kind of the first year that we did a draft or a trade deadline show where we were talking about prospects the Cubs traded away. That's what this is going to be trending towards this year as well. Obviously, it's talking about the guys that get traded away. But very pointed episodes these next few weeks, and this is the MLB Draft preview episode. And so how we're going to kind of structure this one is we're going to take the first part of the episode to kind of look back at the last several drafts that the Cubs have had and look at some trends, look at what Dan Kantrovitz and his team have done in the draft over the past few years, and then we're going to roll that into Greg Zumach doing his thing and talking about some names that we can look out for in the coming in the first round and then beyond for the draft on Sunday and Monday. So you want to go ahead and lead off with some trends? Where you want to start us off here with what we've looked at the past several years?
Yeah, I mean, I think a few things we want to highlight. I would go back to 2021 because 2020 is really not very informative. Kantrovitz was new into the system. They hadn't really made a lot of changes. 2020 was insane. So not saying you need to absolve them of like not really sticking the landing on the draft. I think that's totally fair criticism, but it's just not really informative to where they are now and projecting 2025. So I really look at 2021, 22, and 23. And then obviously 2024, because I couldn't remember what year it was really briefly, like, oh God, we are in 2025. But the past 4 years are really where I'd look at, and especially the past 3. So with 2021, 2023, and 2024, we really saw what I would say is the overarching view of if a player falls to the Cubs, they're pretty decent chance they're going to take him. Somebody that like their internal model, which as a reminder, all MLB teams use data modeling, like every single one of them. But if their internal model has somebody who is very clearly above the next tier, they're likely going to take them. So with Jordan Wicks, they internally had him. This is public now. This isn't like private information, but they had him much higher, like 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th best player.
And he was selected in 21 overall.
He went to 21. Matt Shaw, 2023 was much higher. Cam Smith, also much higher. And all 3 of those guys have made the majors. Truth be told, very, very good selections. Alongside that, you also have 2022, which is a very different situation. The Cubs identified a particular player that they felt they could both get a underslot deal done, but also get a very premium player at the perfect time. And that was Cade Horton. And of the 21, 23, and 24 drafts, they were drafting a little bit lower. 22 was an exception.
Mm-hmm.
They're drafting 7th overall. If I had to guess, I would say we probably see something a little bit more in the middle on that. But as far as drafting tendencies, if there is somebody that is just on the board that probably shouldn't be, there's a decent chance that there's going to be some folks within the Cubs organization that are saying, you have this guy 10th on the board. He's way better than the guy you have 18th. You should take this person. And so we probably are in that kind of range.
Well, and I think what's interesting there too, and if you're looking at 21, 23, 24, those are the years that they took the guy that essentially fell to them at their selection. 21, they in 2021 they selected 21st overall. In 2023 they selected 13th overall, and in 2024 they selected 14th overall. This year they're selecting 17th overall. And so the difference in all 4 of those seasons compared to the 2022 season is, you mentioned 2022 they were drafting 7, so there's not a whole lot of like, this guy is going to fall to you. Like there's not a guy that can fall multiple tiers below where the Cubs feel like he should have been drafted. And so this year, it does make a whole lot of sense to me that they continue to follow that script that they've laid out in past years, where they do draft the guy that they view as maybe the 8th or 9th best prospect in this year's draft that falls to them at number 17. Like that seems right in line with what we've seen under Dan Kantrovitz over the past few years. And so all 3 of those years, actually all 4 of these years that Dan Kantrovitz has been in charge outside of the 2020 season, the Cubs have gone with a college draft pick. They've gone college pitcher twice, and they've gone college hitter twice. And I think that when you're in this range, you see a lot of that. I think that it makes a whole lot of sense to go the college route, especially in this 17-ish range, give or take 5 slots or so.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to go with the strength of the draft. And, the 2022 year was very funny because Cade Horton, until the very end, really wasn't being talked about right up there. When the draft happened, it caught a lot of people by surprise. We did a podcast where we were live streaming. It caught us by surprise. The feedback on the back end is that teams had actually already moved him up. Mm-hmm. And he was a really consensus, like top 10. I've heard very directly somebody's like he was going top 11. So that was the Rockies, I think, at the time. And so, we probably shouldn't have been as surprised by that. But the public and private side, you're going to get a delay on that. And there's going to be some surprises in this upcoming draft, without a doubt. But I would say that looking at players who maybe entered the year with preseason, was viewed very, very highly. And then when the draft kind of comes up, maybe you get some groupthink in there. Maybe you just get some people who are kind of overthinking things. And then all of a sudden somebody you didn't even think was going to be on the board is like, holy cow, they're sitting there at 17. Cubs snap them up. Like that really would be a very typical situation for them. And then the rest of the draft, likely going to see a couple overslots. I mean, the Cubs have really done that very, very often, where even if they're not going under slot in the first round, they're going over slot in the second round. And so we've seen like Jackson Ferris, Jackson Wiggins, spelled differently, of course. Both of those guys were actually overslots. Wiggins was very surprising for people that he was an overslot. People thought he might be an underslot. No, the Cubs had a ton of conviction, knew what they were seeing, made a good evaluation there. We've seen several of those like under and over. Cole Matthews is like slot. But I mean, I would say that going over for the several of the picks from rounds like 2 through 4 would be what I would expect on that. So yeah. I would say some kind of a conviction pick round 1, over slots 2 through 4, something like that. And then really loading up on guys that internally they view on their models. And then their model's going to change a little bit. And so, if I had to guess, I would guess that there's, projectable pitchers with some stuff, somebody that's really, something that their pitching development team can get their hands on. And then power. Probably a lot of power. I think that might be if you had to distill it down to one metric, which the Cubs model doesn't do, I'm sure. Power, I think, is going to be what they're going to look for. And maybe not in the first round, but throughout the draft, I think very much so.
Yeah, in looking at these drafts, I got the draft classes pulled up on my screen in front of me. And looking at last year's, if we're kind of looking back on some past classes, and we don't have to go through each and every name here, obviously, as a part of this podcast, but I think it's interesting that in last year's draft class, they took 3 high school players in the entire 20-round draft. They took 17 college guys and 3 high school players. They were Ronnie Cruz selected in the 3rd round and actually went under slot bonus, which basically, if you guys out there are unaware of the slot situation, we're not going to detail that in a lot of, we could go for half an hour on that. But basically, there's a slot value assigned to each selection throughout the draft, especially in rounds 1 through 10. And then a player can sign at slot value, over slot value, under slot value, and that then affects how much money you have to spend elsewhere in other rounds. I guess if that's the best way to describe it. Yep. Anyways, Ronnie Cruz, high school draft pick, under slot. Ty Saltacine was selected in the 4th round, and he was over slot, and he was actually the only over slot guy in the first 10 rounds of the draft last year, which is kind of crazy. And then Eli Lovich was obviously over slot, drafted in the 11th round, a year after the Cubs got Zaire Hope in the 11th round out of high school, also over slot. So I thought that the draft class last year was really interesting in the fact that it skewed a lot of college players, and in that 11 through 20 rounds, a lot of college arms.
You know, I'll be honest, and this isn't like a criticism of the individuals in the room. I didn't really particularly like the style after the first round last year. I liked some individual players that they took, and there are definitely some that have shown out to be really successful. I liked them at the time, but I didn't like the overall style. I thought that it skewed too heavily to the safe demographic. And yes, you want to get a little bit of that. You don't want to go just all risk, but at the end of the day, you're also one of the top 5 most premier franchises with a war chest that the rest of your division doesn't have. I'm not saying that you can utilize that during the draft. You can utilize that in other ways to acquire talent, though. Mm-hmm. And so you're not going to be so dependent on filling out your roster with 1.5 to 2 war players. Like, they're valuable and they are good, but I think it's skewed a little bit to the safe side. And I would probably have some people within the organization, push back on that pretty hard. Just my opinion on it. I'm hoping for a little bit more firepower in this draft, and maybe I'm just kind of projecting of my own kind of desires on that, but I would like a little bit more fireworks. I think this is the year to do it. Or if nothing else, load up with college arms, because I think the pitching infrastructure that they've put in place now has the ability to do some really impressive work with some pitchers development.
Another thing that really stands out to me when looking at these recent draft classes is how quickly the Cubs have turned some of these draft picks into trade pieces to acquire major league talent. Right, the 2023 class, that was Matt Shaw's draft class, has already had 4 guys traded from it. Josh Rivera was traded for Nate Pearson. Alfonso Rosario was traded for Eli Morgan. Zaire Hope was part of the Michael Busch deal, and Ty Johnson was a part of the Isaac Paredes deal. And then in 2024, obviously flipped Cam Smith for Kyle Tucker. And so, I don't know, it stands out to me as like the Cubs are really good in the draft at identifying guys that really break out almost immediately and are worth more value-wise soon after they're drafted. Like a guy like Ty Johnson, who was selected in the 15th round, the fact that they were able to flip him almost exactly 1 calendar year later as a part of a important part of a trade package. Not he wasn't the lead of the trade package, but he was important to be included as a part of that trade package. I think if Ty Johnson that time in the summer of 2024 as opposed to 2023, I think he gets selected 5 to 10 rounds higher than he did in his 2023 draft class. I think the Cubs have been really good at identifying guys that really break out quickly.
No, I think you're right. And the thing about if you think about like what they've done with the draft and flipping these prospects, the thing is that it's not talked about at all on Cubs Twitter. Like the fact that Cam Smith is gone or Zaire. No, I'm teasing, of course. But if you think about how a team is going to, because I think you approached it from a really logical step, and I would say that I am guessing that your viewpoint that you just expressed really lines up with how the Cubs organization views it, which is, hey, we've got 20 rounds to work with, and obviously want to keep a bunch of these players, but it's all about getting total value. And so if you can take some guys that your development team can address something with, and all of a sudden they look a whole lot better. Ty Johnson, perfect example, right? Like if he had gone in a later draft, probably gets drafted much, much earlier. Well, all of a sudden he's viewed differently by teams. And so it's like, well, you cash in that shit. That's great. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we keep seeing a mix of this. It's not something you do when your organization is in like a losing model, but right now they're in a winning model. And so if they can cash in like a 15th rounder for somebody that can help with the major leagues, you kind of quote unquote lock in that war value or have a better chance of it. So yeah, I think it's absolutely it's a very real consideration, and I don't know how I feel about it. I can understand both sides. There's definitely parts of me that wish some of those players hadn't gone, but I also understand the overall concept.
I only have two more thoughts in looking back at recent years' draft classes. One is Dan Kantrovitz and the draft team and all the scouts are really, really good at this. Like they are terrific at drafting, and they have been for the past few years. And I want to say that because I think that for years, the Cubs draft team caught a lot of flack for their inability to draft from, I'd say, outside of the first round, right? Outside of their first round.
Outside of the first round.
All of the Chris Bryant and Javi Baez and Kyle Schwarber drafts. Outside of that, they caught a lot of flack. And I think that it's important to point out now that they have been super, super successful. That 2023 draft class is terrific. The 2021 draft class is very, very good. In 2022 produced Cade Horton. Right? They deserve credit
and
where
Jackson
credit
Ferris.
is due.
I mean, Jackson
Ferris, yeah,
huge. But yeah, absolutely.
And the only other thing I have is about a specific player. So I'm looking through. Yeah. I have a draft tracker that I keep every single year, multiple tabs for every season. And so in preparation for our draft recap show, last year I jotted down just like some really like brief notes on every single player that was drafted in all 20 rounds. And I get a kick out of my 4-word note on Eli Lovich that was selected in the 11th round. Like these were just like quick and dirty like notes. I did a lot of research prior to like talking on the podcast, but my quick and dirty notes is Owen Casey, but weighs 10 pounds. It was my note of Eli Lovich, which still reigns true today a little bit.
You know, it's funny because once you dropped that comp on the podcast, it was like glass breaking.
Yeah.
Whereas like, oh, now I can't unsee that.
Yeah.
I will say somebody else has brought up, and maybe it's just kind of the names that sound familiar, but you know, Cub fans won't really like this, but this is a great outcome. Like Christian Yelich, when he was in Miami for Eli Lovich, and it's like, man, that actually does look really, really, really close. Mm-hmm. So I mean, there's definitely some fun ones. Look, I probably carry a little bit of a bias. You know, I've crossed paths with Dan and some of the scouting team, and I think they're just genuinely good people. And so maybe that colors my analysis a little bit. But I think that there's a lot of work that gets done behind the scenes, and it's not all glory. There's a lot of days that I'll talk to some of the folks, and they'll talk about spending, 8 hours at a showcase in the rain in, I don't even want to say what state, but like it's not glamorous, and they get a lot of information. They do a lot of hustling. So I think they've done some really good work the last few years, and I am very hopeful that 2025, because it's a pivotal one, they really got to nail this draft. And I think they can. I think that there's some really intriguing players.
So let's talk about the players then.
Let's do it.
I think it makes the most sense to start at number 17, the first
Yep.
overall first round selection. I know that you did a really good solo episode here on Cubs on Deck episode. I think it was 104. So if you guys want to go back and listen to that episode, definitely worthwhile to get to know some of the players and some of the guys that you seem to like, Greg. But what are some names that you want to call out that we should really keep an eye on, right? Like it can be a little bit of notes on each guy so we can get to know them a little bit, but more so like what names should I be going into the draft? Because I'm not the draft expert. You are here. And so like you're preaching to me as much as you're talking to everybody listening to the show. What name should I be looking out for come draft day?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is very much the painting where if you stare at it too closely, you only see dots, and then when you look back, you may see the whole picture. So it's possible that I'm staring at the dots and overthinking some of this. But I would say let's do kind of a quick lightning round on a few names to just watch out for. Tyler Bremner is going to be a name that I don't think he makes it to 17, but he fits a lot of what the Cubs would probably want to get, which is a college arm that needs a little bit of development, but not much. Tweak his slider. He's probably up in the majors being pretty good. A couple preps that I want to highlight is...
Let me comment real quick on Bremner. I know that the Cubs have obviously done their scouting of Bremner in past years because last year they selected Ivan Brennauer and Ryan Gallagher, both out of UC Santa Barbara. So they've obviously very familiar with Tyler Bremner.
Yeah, sorry, I should give a little bit of a demographic and like where they're from too. So a couple preps that I want to highlight is Xavier Nyans. He's a Washington State prep who has a ton of power, needs some approach changes. For instance, he just doesn't chase the ball, which normally sounds like a really good thing, except for the fact that he just doesn't swing as much as he should. And so his chase rate's kind of like abnormally low. Xavier Nyans, if he's there at 17, makes a ton of sense. I've talked to some scouts who really like him. And so I think he's absolutely one that I would look at. I'm a little skeptical that he's actually there at 17 when all is said and done, but alas. Cunningham is probably the name that I want to highlight a little bit more. This is a Texas high school, so prep player, plays shortstop, probably a second baseman. On the surface, isn't something that wows fans. I think that there are some wow factors in there. This is a player with an insanely impressive contact rate. So I think he had about a 96% in-zone contact rate. So basically when the ball was coming in the strike zone, he swung, he made contact with it. Contact rate isn't the only thing, though. You want to do some power. And if you evaluate him on what he did as far as damage, he hit the ball hard at a similar percentage as some of the, what I would say is more slugger, upper tier sluggers within that prep class. Not on the same scale as like an Ethan Holiday, but along very qualified hitters that you would say are not, they're not slouches. They're definitely have more in the power department. He's got some significant bat speed, and I think that's going to help. I think there's probably some tweaks to add a little bit more power and loft to that. But that's definitely is somebody that I would want to talk to. I get mixed opinions on whether it sticks at shortstop. It's probably a second baseman. But this is a guy that came in entering the year. I thought he and Nyans were going to be much higher.
Yeah, I mean, and those are two high school bats with Nyans and Cunningham, obviously, with the college arm and Tyler Bremner. And does Cunningham, if he does not develop into that, like having decent power at the minor league level, I guess, is there speed to fall back on in addition to him having that contact ability? Is it a contact speed profile that can be there as well?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that this is a player that, again, when you say like he doesn't have a lot of power, it's not like he doesn't have any power. And I'm not saying you're saying that, but when I'm kind of trying to extrapolate that a little bit, we have to kind of look at how players even settle in at second base. And there's a handful of players that will get to like 20 plus home runs as a second baseman, but it's not a lot of them in the major leagues. So we're probably looking in that like 12 to 20 range, which is where most second basemen sit. And also you add the contact ability on that, hopefully get into some loft, power, speed. I mean, there's a lot of qualities that I think are really successful. I'm not saying he's the guy I would be pounding the table for, saying we have to take Huss and Cunningham. But I think that if he is on the board, which I've been growing more and more likely that if he gets past Texas, he likely is, he might make a ton of sense for the Chicago Cubs. There's a couple names that I just want to also highlight a little bit that I get asked about. And I mean, I think we got to acknowledge them. You know, guys like Riley Quick, I'm a big fan of. He's a college arm down in Alabama. I think that there's some workable pitching traits that are certainly available to him, and I think he could improve. I get asked about Gage Wood all the time. You know, we'll see when it all shakes out. Obviously had an amazing day in Omaha, but obviously showed some qualities before that. You know,
Gage Wood was he was the guy who threw the no-hitter.
Yep. No-hitter. Yeah, I'm still chippy I didn't attend that game, but I have mentally worked past that. So, but I mean, you know, so he had an amazing, he's got some amazing qualities to him. Is that going to line up for the Cubs? I don't know. But, you know, I get asked about him, and certainly he would likely be a guy that they would be talking about behind the scenes. And then I think a lot, you know, Josh Hammond is another prep. He's a prep in North Carolina area. Really like Josh Hammond. I'm not positive where they feel on him, but I think that he would definitely be a guy to follow.
And is that another prep bat or
another prep bat? Sorry. So right-handed pitcher actually is how he came into this cycle. Most people had him as a pitcher. He's now viewed as more of a third baseman, shortstop. I think he's really impressive. He may not make it to 17 anymore. There's some talk that there's some teams right above the Cubs that aren't going to let him get past. We'll see if that's just chatter. But definitely a guy that if you talk to scouts in that area are really impressed with Josh Hammond. They flipped from pitcher to hitter later in the spring and had a whole bunch of cross-checkers coming out to fly out to see him. So he's got a ton of buzz to the point that I'm not positive he's going to be there. The bat that I get asked about or see linked, it's everywhere, right, is Aloy, who is the shortstop in Arkansas. And I get it, but I think that when we connect that player to the Cubs in mocks, it's a little bit more connecting the dots than it is truly like they love Aloy. They're going to take him if he's there. I don't necessarily get that sense. I'm not saying that they don't like him. I think that people behind the scenes would undoubtedly look at this guy and say he's a first rounder. He's a quality bat and at a premium position. I don't get the sense that there's this like, this is our guy. And it could all be a smokescreen. I could be completely off on that. But I think Aloy is just one of those guys. I'm not positive that if he's there, he's this no doubt pick like I see, and this isn't to knock any publication, but I see it in like Baseball America and Pipeline and a few others where you just see Cubs and Aloy and like, yeah, I understand it on the surface. I'm not positive that that's how it shakes out, which you can clip this when I'm inevitably wrong, but you know, that's just my thoughts.
No, that's interesting because I think Aloy is probably the name I've seen mocked to the Cubs the most. Shortstop out of Arkansas, Golden Spikes Award finalist, I believe, and just a really impressive player at Arkansas, SEC shortstop. But yeah, I've seen him probably mocked the most to the Cubs. I think that Tyler Bremner is probably the guy I've seen mocked the second most to the Cubs.
So really quickly with Aloy, is that it makes sense. Like if you're digging into the Cubs and have looked at how they've drafted in the past, he is a guy that is like, well, he's the best hitter on the board. He plays a premium defensive position, even if he has to move off it, which he won't. But like Shaw and Cam Smith and everything did. And you can look at it and say, well, that just makes so much sense. And again, like, I think that there's people that like Aloy. I don't think that it's a bad pick or a bad intel or anything. I just don't get this sense that it's like fait accompli, like it's being portrayed. I don't think that it's like, well, if Aloy's on the board, I had somebody message this, and I hope this doesn't come off like mean that I'm kind of bringing this up, but somebody was like, you run to the podium with like 0.001 seconds, you know, this after you're announced. And it's like, I don't think that's the case. Mm-hmm. Maybe they like him, but I don't know.
So with Aloy, he's a guy that stands out as being very successful in college, and he is portrayed, like you said, in a lot of ways as like a slam dunk for the Cubs, even if that's not the case. Versus Cam Smith and Matt Shaw, I think that like both of those draft picks were kind of a little bit of a slow burn. It wasn't like the Cubs selected Matt Shaw and Cam Smith, and immediately we were like, this is the greatest selection of all time. And so if the Cubs were going to go that route, where it was kind of like, okay, the Cubs got this guy, and then a day later, you're like, oh man, I think the Cubs like figured it out. And then 2 months later, you're like, oh, they really figured it out. Like, who is that pick potentially for the Cubs in this draft? Because I do think that the college hitters are kind of a little bit trickier in this range.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to pick like a couple people, we'll just look at college hitters, because I think that we've kind of dug in on some of the other names there, but like Tennessee has got some. Mm-hmm. Andrew Fisher, first baseman, but he's played third base before. So gosh, that wouldn't really, and did fairly well in the Cape. And that wouldn't shock me if they had kind of a book on him that's like, you know what, he can play third base. He just moved to first base because Tennessee had people. He really mashes. And I think conceptually, if you were going to go bat, that's college bat, that's probably where I'd go. Gavin Kylan, shortstop at Tennessee. I don't think he's a shortstop. You could probably run him out there to start. And honestly, not too dissimilar from like Matt Shaw. And he's just a really good bat. And also Tennessee, neither of that would really surprise me, to be honest. I don't have like strong intel there, but yeah, like neither of those picks would surprise me. And if the name came up, I would do the exact reaction of like, okay, all right, okay. I think I got what they're doing. And then later you'd probably look at it when like Andrew Fisher has got like a, 950 OPS in Myrtle Beach or something like that in September, that it's like, okay, I got you. Or probably high A.
Let's keep the Knoxville guys in Knoxville. Yeah, that'd be good. All right, I'm going to let you open up the book here a little bit and talk guys that are maybe deeper cuts later in the draft. But let me run through. I wrote down, as you kind of mentioned them, these names to kind of look out for, just so we can, as fans, be in tune with these 9 names you just mentioned, and kind of have them on our cheat sheet as we're watching the draft on this Sunday. High school bats: Josh Hammond, Xavier Nyans, and Kason Cunningham. College arms: Riley Quick, Gage Wood, and Tyler Bremner. And then college bats: what is it? Wehiwa Aloy?
Wehiwa, I think it is.
Yeah.
Aloy.
When the Cubs draft him, I will learn a whole lot better. I promise. Aloy out of Arkansas.
I should probably know the pronunciation, but
Andrew Fisher and Gavin Kylan, both out of Tennessee. So keep a cheat sheet, guys, of those names.
Yeah. So let's do some just deeper cuts, and some of them actually won't be probably as deep, but there are a few guys that probably I'll include in like a mock or something. I'm finalizing my 20 rounder. I think I'm pretty much done at this point. And so couple of the names I want to highlight just as arms that when I talk to pitching interested folks in the industry, they kind of highlight some of these guys. One of them is Cade Obermueller, left-handed pitcher out of Iowa. I think that pitching interested folks are going to look at what he can do from the left-hand side. It's a very low angle, comes in with a lot of rise. Think Shota Imanaga, probably not to that extreme level. Shota is like a major outlier there, but kind of like a Matthew Boyd where things are kind of rising a little bit. Shota, rising fastball from the left side, big sweeper. He has some things he needs to work out on, but he leveled up. I think he was selected in the 14th and 19th round last year. 19th round is sticking out to me. Elected not to sign with Detroit, came back, leveled up, hitting higher velocity, showing a lot of traits there, touching 98. He doesn't sit 98, but he's touched it. I think that there's some workable qualities to him. Another guy that I think Lance Bresdowski has talked about a little bit is Marcus Phillips. He's a right-handed pitcher. Again, Tennessee, a lot of Tennessee folks. And, I think you could make an argument that he's probably a first-round caliber player. He's a development dream. Really, Obermueller and Phillips are both development dreams. And so if either one of them are there at 56, I think that if you ask some folks in the industry, they would make a lot of sense. And the Cubs can work with those qualities. As far as how the scouts internally feel about him, will remain to be seen. But I think that those are two guys in the second round that I would look at very, very closely.
I guess outside, so those are two college arms.
Yeah,
probably second round draft picks.
Yes.
Anything else you got? I know we're running up against time here.
Yeah.
So is there anybody else even deeper? Because I know that
yeah.
You can keep going. Like you could probably put together a 20-round mock if you wanted to.
Well, it's almost done. So yeah, it'll probably come out the day of the draft. So a couple names that just I'm personal fans of, I really like, are a couple right-handed pitchers down in like the lower parts of the U.S., the southern states. Guys like Brian Curley and Cam Tilley they're just names that I've particularly liked. Relievers in the SEC, but I think they can start. And those are some names. I mean, Cam Tilley I've liked since high school. And so if I had to just like create a mock, which is of course what I'm doing and what I'll put out there, I really, really would bring them up. There's also finally an outfielder with Seton Hall, AJ Soldra, and he is tearing up the Cape. I have no idea how any of the Cub Scouts feel about him, but I really like him. And I think that he is a guy that's going to get drafted this year and look very good to the people, whoever the team that drafts him. So I have no idea how they feel about him, but I really like AJ Soldra, and I'm hoping the Cubs draft him because he's going to be somebody I'm going to follow very, very closely. So yeah, just a couple SEC arms that I like: Cam Tilley, Brian Curley, and then an outfielder, AJ Soldra. There's another college arm that was tearing up the Cape, and so I want to mention him, is JT Quinn. He's gotten some love from some folks and some publications recently. I think that love is deserved. I don't look at where he's ranked. I don't know. I think it's like 120, one something. Don't look at that. I think that that's going to be viewed as very, very late, second, third rounder kind of a thing. Does he fit for the Cubs? I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, like, I would like to take a stab on that. So yeah, just some names to kind of run through. Cade Obermueller, Marcus Phillips are guys that within the industry, a lot of pitching folks seem to really like and gravitate. Lance Brzezowski's talked about him. I want to highlight both of those guys. JT Quinn and AJ Soldra are tearing up the Cape kind of for different reasons. And then some SEC arms that I've liked for a while, especially with Cam Tilley. Cam Tilley and Brian Curley, probably starters at the next level. They're doing a little bit more relieving now, and I think a smart team is going to, or multiple smart teams are going to jump on that. So that was kind of rapid fire, but we'll see. A few of those names I think will end up in the mock, and we'll see if the Cubs land in any of them.
These guys that you really dig, when they ultimately end up, or when or if they ultimately get drafted by other teams, like in past years, do you still follow them pretty closely with the other organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I still watch Zach Neto highlights all the time, and that was my guy. I mean, Cade Horton worked out really well, right? But like Zach Neto was the person I was like standing on the chair saying, you got to draft this guy. And there's a few people that I still follow, not just to bring up the successes, because I've certainly whiffed on plenty of them, but my shadow Cubs draft in 2023, I'm pretty sure, 2024, it was Colt Emerson and Jacob Mizorowski were 1-2. I think I did pretty well on that.
Those guys are decent, yeah.
Those guys are pretty decent, right? It's much to the chagrin of Cubs fans. But, also that's just the fun of doing these. I do a shadow draft afterwards. I actually probably will publish my 2024 when I locked in my picks last summer, so I can't just look at it in hindsight. But I've had that one cooking for a while. So I follow them. I just like to see if I was right or if I was wrong. I've had some that are certainly very wrong. Oh man, I am blanking on who. Vandenberg, the first baseman got drafted by Miami. I loved him. I would have taken him in the 2nd or 3rd round. Has not succeeded. But I would have been on the table pounding it, saying we should take this guy. So, you win some, you lose some, but I learn a lot from each one.
Where can we find your mock draft, and where can we find your content and stuff leading up to Sunday's draft?
Yeah, so if you want to join the 1060 West Discord, I highly recommend it. A little bit biased there, but that's where I publish some of my work. And I usually post the articles the day before on 1060 West Discord. Ask us for a link. Happy to provide that for you. We have a good community. It's mostly Cubs or not just Cubs prospects, but it's mostly Cubs talk. But we talk about all of MLB, and we have some writers and some fans from outside the Cubs that occasionally drop in and give their hints on things. But 1060 West is usually where I will drop things the day before. And then you can also find me on like Twitter and Blue Sky with regard to like at Ivy Futures. And I'll post a link to the Substack. Substack is free. It's just what I use, so I don't have to create a website.
Yep, that's fair. All right, Greg, I appreciate it. This is so much fun. We'll chat again this time around this time next week. I know there's gonna be some new Cubs in the farm system to talk about, which is super fun. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. You can find me on social media at Out of the Vines, the 1060 West Discord channel, all that fun stuff. And in the meantime, really appreciate you listening. Give us a like, give us a comment below on the YouTube channel if you would like to. Who do you want to see the Cubs select? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and we'll see if it comes true this time next week. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll be back in your ears in one short week.